Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
What do you get when you bring a finance guy, a school principal, and a lawyer together? Three people who could never be wrong because they are the three Wright brothers. Oh, and guys, don't suck.
Happy Sunday, everybody. It is that time of the week again where three Wright brothers get together, update themselves on the progress that they made all week, give each other a hard time, pay each other back, kick each other in the butt if they need it, I suppose. Brian and Kevin, thanks for joining us again on a Sunday, a busy week. Here we're back talking a podcast, trying to get in better shape. So how's everything going?
Good.
I'm not making any progress.
Well, I don't know about that, but Casey, probably not for you, but for us in Cincinnati, it's a big day, right? AFC Championship. So looking forward to that. A couple hours.
It's a big day for me too, because I put a big bet down on Cincinnati. So hopefully they cover and I can make some money.
Well, they like to talk.
What was the bet? What bet did you put down?
I just bet for them. I think I took the odds because they were going back and forth all week, and I took the parlay. Let me go check and see. I think it took them, and I took Philadelphia in a minute. But I also took a prop bet in there too, which was, I think, Chase to score.
Yeah. Well, good luck. I've not placed my bets yet.
It's interesting because, I had a rule, I try not to bet on professional sports because I just think that the talent level is too close. And so it's hard to pick a winner in those two sports. And, so I've been betting a lot on college basketball because the spreads are so big and you can make a little bit of money on bets if you bet a lot of different teams. But then so Brian came over. Brian was up here, and I bought that pool table. Yeah. And my goal was to pay for the pool table by the bets I made. And so I would draw
a genius idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did.
What could go wrong? Keep doubling down on that.
Well, we'll give you an update. I was successful, so I withdrew the money to pay for the pool table on Thursday.
You made enough money betting to pay for the pool table.
Almost, not quite all of it, but enough that I withdrew it to pay for the pool table. And then I noticed that I must have had a couple bets that are still out there, and so I noticed when I logged in today there was still money in that account. So I'm like, all right, well, what is what can I bet here that will make this game a little more interesting? And, I don't know. So that's what I did.
So you do that. So did you hear about that guy? What game was it? Where it was it Jacksonville that came back from 27 points down in the first round of the playoffs? Was that the game?
So the story that I heard is this guy at halftime bet $1 million for the Jags to win. Because they were up so big, the payout was only going to be
11 grand. Yeah, it's 11 grand.
Yeah.
Because he thought it was a sure thing, and certainly it didn't happen. So the dude lost $1 million on a halftime bet.
So imagine that conversation, like you're sweating through that game, and then you got to turn over to your wife and be like, "Honey, I just lost $1.5 million on a sure thing bet that I
we could have won
all of our savings."
So I lost money on that game too. And
not $1 million,
not $1 million, $50. And I bet on the last drive. I bet that they wouldn't score on that last drive. And
so you lost $50.
Yeah. I would tell you almost all of my professional bets, whether it's basketball or football, not all of them, that's probably wrong, but great majority of them have lost.
Really?
Whereas college is a little different. I think I get more success in college, but understand I take as close to sure things in college. So I look at anybody that is 9 points or above on the spread, and then I try to parlay that.
So what do you bet them to like win, or you you take the points? What do you do?
I just take the money line and then I parlay it.
Okay.
So I'll bet like 10 different games and then parlay it, and then it takes a lot of discipline because you'd only win $7, $8, $9, $10 per game. And so you got to do it. You got to stay consistent with it over, 10, 20 days before it makes any difference.
All right. So before we get started,
because this is not a betting podcast.
Yeah. Well, before we get, we can hear you fine, Megan. Well, hold on. Before we get started, Like we jumped on here for progress. So what's the update, Kevin Casey? I just saw Casey, so I know his progress.
So the progress in terms of, well, let's tell people who's joined us on the podcast first, because I heard somebody were like, wait a minute, Kevin, Brian, and Casey don't have a sister. So let's do
a female.
Let's do an introduction first, and then we can kind of get into the progress and talk a little bit to Megan. So I want to introduce a friend of mine who we talked about this before we officially had asked Megan to join the podcast, but thought it would be somebody who might have who's actually a professional that might have some good advice for us, opposed to us just talking about, the things we think work and don't work and vice versa. So, a little bit about Megan, we're neighbors. And I think in the previous podcast a year or two ago, we brought on Zach, who played professional baseball, and we talked about sports, and it was fun because he gave us some insight there. Zach and Megan are married, and I'm actually going over to Megan's house in a few hours. We have our superstition in which, we have to do the same things we did last year, or the Bengals aren't going to go to the Super Bowl, because to your point, Casey, I am the main character in all the world stories. It has
no, the hero, not just the hero. Hero, right? So everybody has to be their own hero in their story.
So
he's the one that causes them to win. It's his presence at his neighbor's house what pulls out that victory.
Which, of course, now we know who to blame if they don't win.
And I'm not going to lie. I'm a little I don't have on the sweatshirt I wore last weekend. I'm not super superstitious, but there are sometimes little things that I'm like, ooh, I'm wearing a different sweatshirt today. I wonder if I should go pull the one out of the laundry.
Do you have to sit in the same spot in the couch? Like you can't mess that up. You got to sit.
I'm not like
that.
I'm not
go that far. There's too much chaos going on. But
so
it's
Zach is calling me right now, and he knows I'm on this podcast, so I don't really. Oh. It's like, what wings should I buy? That's probably what it is.
I did, Megan, invite my mom over to your house.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I said, Mom, do you want to go over, to the days for the game? I'm sure you're welcome. She's like, no, are you kidding me? Because she knows a superstition, and she's like, I have to stay here and you have to go there because, and I laughed a little bit.
Aww.
So, okay, a little bit about Megan. So Megan, well, I have your bio here, but you can kind of, give us some color on it. You're a health and wellness coach,
yes.
certified.
Mm-hmm.
You have some years of experience working for some smaller, we'll call them growth industry. We know that health coaching is a growing industry out there, and I think you've spent some time. Recently, you started your own company in which take on health coaching. So we can talk a little bit about that. I think you went to UC, in which you have a degree in that industry as well. And then overall, I think you have 10, 20 years of experience between different roles that you've had in the coaching and the athletic side. So why don't you give us a little background of what you've been working on?
Yeah. So yes, I do. I have it's funny, I'm looking at my degree right there above me. And okay, I'm gonna have to make sure I get this right. Casey's the principal. Brian's the attorney, right?
Yep.
Okay. So Casey will probably find this funny. My degree says a Bachelor of Science in Education, although I never took anything that would allow me to teach in a school. But my degree fell under the College of Education. And so I do have a bachelor's in health promotion and education with a community health and exercise science focus. So I worked in community health over the years. I've worked in gyms. I've personal trained. I've worked for the Red Cross. I've done a lot of stuff in various aspects of health and wellness. And then, like many people, I went into all kinds of other things. I was like, oh, let me try real estate and let me try this and that. And that was a lot due to when Zach and I got married, and I kind of took a hiatus knowing that this was an opportunity that I may not have to sort of travel with him, see the country, see Canada quite a bit. And so I did some other stuff, and then personal health challenges that mimic a lot of what you all have been talking about the past couple podcasts, sort of played a part in my life. And it brought me back around to sort of paying attention to myself and my health and getting myself back, I think, in check. And I realized, no, you know what? Like this is what I truly do love. And I really felt that burning desire to help others again. So I started to research, because it was COVID at that point. What else is there? Because the one theme I found in my entire career, whether it's trying to get, a school to adopt a health and safety program, to helping somebody adopt, maybe better nutrition or different behavior change, like taking the action is hard. And so it was kind of like, okay, why? There is this gap. And it happened that health coaching, true certified accredited programs are giving professionals the tools to help others close that gap. And so that's when I went through this they actually weren't online and then COVID. So that was kind of nice. They're out in California, or Colorado, I mean, Catalyst Coaching Institute. And I went through them to get my certificate, went on to sit for the boards. They are put on by the medical examiner. So it's like a 4-hour board, like it's a pretty intense, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. Health coaching as a term, I feel like it's just thrown out there, and it's part of like the clutter of all the information we have in the health and wellness field. I'm a health coach. Okay, so what's that mean? Those that are like certified and really are coaching in the way that I am, it's the behavior change piece. Now we can remove that hat and put on the expert hat, like personal training, nutrition, whatever, all these other aspects of wellness. But we're actually not here to be like the expert unless asked. You all are the experts in your lives. And the coaching part is really helping you to understand and unpack what works for you, what health looks like for you, what success looks like for each one of you, and then putting a plan around that, right? And then along the way, if there's questions about nutrition or exercise or, I don't know, stress management, you guys talked about mental health last time. Those pieces can fall into place within a certain scope for me. And then if it gets out of scope for certain health coaches, depending on their background and their areas of expertise beyond health coaching, they then can fill those gaps by resourcing, finding other resources, referring out, or they can help people in those aspects as well. So hopefully that, I don't know, I kind of went off. Kevin knows that this is not going to be a hard hour to fill because I talk a lot.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of get a little scattered here anyways. So last week, I don't know if you caught the 60 Minutes with did you see that with Dr. Cody works in the Biden administration? Super interesting in what she said. She said that obesity is a disorder of the brain. It's also very heavily involved in genetics, meaning as much as you can cut calories and exercise, your body has a reset. And when it resets itself, it's going to reset itself based on what your brain tells its body that its weight should be. My serious opinion is there any legitimacy to that?
Well, she would be my expert I'd look to. But here's a fun fact. The company I just stopped working for, Dr. Cody actually sits on their board of experts. Like, it's not really a board of directors, but so it's funny because I caught that. I mean, I knew that was coming up. I just left the company I worked for, Calibrate, a month ago. And there was they knew that she was going to be on. Obviously, she had already, I think, filmed it. Look, I default to her. Like, I default to the doctors. It's like, I'm not the doctor. So I do follow a lot of people like in social media that are very, very well versed. And I've seen a lot in kind of my bubble of social media on that actual 60 Minute special, a lot of chatter. And there are other doctors, endocrinologists, and people who work in that field that agree with her. So I think that there is science behind. I don't. So I'm kind of defaulting to them on that. I think on my end, on anybody who's in any kind of like lifestyle change piece, the the part that gets a little, and I mean, it's 60 minutes, right? They're going to probably pick and choose what gets put on the show. So she could have gone in grave detail about other stuff that wasn't really, because it did kind of make it seem like a little bit like, sorry, you're screwed. I mean, right? Did anybody
listen, I mean, I watched that, and Brian, Kevin, and I we've been on this journey for a long time since we're kids, and certainly my dad fought that same battle too. And sometimes you want to be watching, like, what's the point, man? Like, what is the point if this is what the default is? I mean, I obviously I don't know what I'm saying, other than the fact that it was, when you hear stuff like that, it's just depressing, I guess.
That's the fear, I think, that a lot of like coaches, people in the fitness industry, any industry that's there to help serve people, that's the fear, is that it's going to make people feel self-defeated and kind of like, what's the point? And that's not good. And I think that's where actually there was some chatter. I was kind of, in the rabbit hole of comments last week. And I think this doctor Arlansky, I think his name is, it was his social media that people were having this conversation. And he actually chimed in, and he agreed. I mean, he agrees, but he's like, what's missing? What kind of was missing that piece? And I think he knows, Dr. Cody, that is the piece that you can, yes, there are, just like, I think Kevin said on the podcast, like, you've been on BP meds for a long time, like in your 20s, like genetically predisposed. Does that mean you're just going to be like, well, screw it? I think the problem is that, or the challenge is that obesity and overweight have not really been treated and looked at as a disease, even though it was classified as one 10-ish, maybe a little longer ago, years ago. It's still very much about willpower. And I think what she was really trying to say is that there are people, and maybe you're going to classify yourself in that, where they've just like, it's always been this a struggle their entire lives. And I have had people that I worked with that actually, it felt good to hear somebody say, like, it's not just me, it's not just my willpower, that there is something genetically predisposing me to having this struggle. But making changes is still important, and making sure, because you can do something about it. Unfortunately, I think what it sounds like from her is that it's just harder for some people.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally true. But when I was watching that, I had a different kind of reaction. I had Brian in the back of my head saying, put the fork down, put the fork down, put the fork down. From this standpoint, here's what I was thinking. Listen, it's not like people have been obese, or a large percentage of the population has been obese since, for most of the 21st, I mean, you look at pictures from 50 years ago,
absolutely,
you don't see 70% of the people that are obese. And so, part of me is like, oh, I'm down with it. Part of, I feel bad and this is hopeless. Part of me is like, dude, it's really hard to generalize really complex topics in a 15-minute piece on 60 minutes. And I don't want to call BS, because she's a million times smarter than me, but I'm going to call BS a little bit. Like, this idea that you can't overcome, or it's just based on something simple like genetics alone. I'm not buying that. If I bought that, well, what's the point, right? I mean,
yeah. And so there's spectrums, right? And you have a lot of people, if you had a linear line, and you have a lot of people to the left and you have a lot of people to the right. So for everyone that you have on the far right, and I'm not talking politics, I'm talking about, let's say weight, you have someone that's, let's be honest, someone that's like Mara Wright or Charlie Wright, where I still maintain, Megan, and you've known for a while, that, and I've said this, there is something genetic about their makeup regarding how they handle food. It's not that they, people come up all the time, they're like, I assumed that Mara was in the weight room like 20 or 30 hours a week. I'm like, she's never seen the inside of a weight room.
Right.
She doesn't either. And you look at her family, her dad, and you kind of feel, you got this feeling like there's some genetic disposition on the other side. So, and then I think when we're in your 20s, and I think society has gotten a little bit better in terms of being smart enough to know that what you're seeing is something that might have been photoshopped, where 20 years ago you didn't realize that there was a Photoshop picture of a male or a female. It doesn't really make a difference, where now you kind of know. And it's more about saying, okay, well, I don't want to be the best, whatever, Brad Pitt. I want to be the best Kevin. And I know that I'm in the range. I know where I am in the Kevin Wright range. And I know that I'm not where I can be. And that's what I'm working towards.
Right.
But there could be other people that are on the far right where it is. There's the predisposition, like you said, my BP. The best health I've ever been in, I was still on blood pressure medication. I was still eating clean, still working out, getting up at 4:30. I still had high blood pressure. So, it's hard because you're right there. You have this 15 minutes and you watch it and you're like, you throw up your hands and you go, why? But it's like life. It's like coaching in sports. It's like, leading a team. You're trying to get the best out of the team. You're trying to get the best out of yourself, and you know that it exists in there somewhere.
Yeah. And I definitely don't want to put words into her mouth. I'll have to say that just kind of reminded me that we did have a lunch and learn, so they would pull these experts and they started doing these little lunch and learns. We could sit in on them, and I love sitting in on that stuff because I love hearing from people like that, especially if they are influencing the program I'm coaching. But I remember we did do one with her back in November, I think it was. Like you said, it's 15 minutes on a very complex subject. I think really what they were really honing in on is that there is something to it really could be treated as a disease. Now, what percentage of people that struggle with their weight, is it truly like a genetic thing and versus a lifestyle thing? And I do wish that they would have spent some time on, okay, so what, this might be something that's very hard to do for some people because it's genetic. However, and here's some research on still the people that still do something about it and that it can be reversed. And to your point, Casey, about 50, 60 years ago, that is one of the major arguments I also see. And even the doctors bring up, there's a whole, the social sort of detriments to health. And there's so many things that influence and epigenetics and all of this stuff that it's just a really, really complex topic. So it's not like, it isn't as simple as, well, if you struggle with your weight, then it must be genetic and good luck with that. It isn't that simple. And I do think that there are a lot of people out, again, in the profession that I'm in, that were maybe a little disheartened watching that, because then they're like, well, now you're basically telling people don't try. At least that it can come across that way. I don't think she actually feels that way. But yeah, I want to say though, I did listen to, and Kevin knows this because I was texting him I listened to the last two podcasts, and I loved it because it gave me, I was like, oh, I wish I would have been there. But it gave me a really, really, really good, picture and foundation of where all of you sit in not just your biometrics and biomarkers and all that, but just where you all sit sort of in the process.
Yeah. Although I would caution you, that is a 1 hour snippet on a Saturday afternoon. I probably felt that way on Saturday afternoon. By Monday morning, I probably felt completely the opposite way.
Well, yeah, I'm sitting here going, wow, mom is going to be like, Jesus, this is the most civil I've seen those three together. Because when we asked you on the podcast, I was like, wow, Megan is going where very few people go before, which is spending some time with the three of us.
Well, if Megan's on here any longer than 45 minutes, right? So if she's a returning guest, she's probably going to face the, nonsense of.
Well, yeah, because you can ask Mara, there was a period, now I think since we've had kids, we've calmed down, but there was a period where each of our wives hated going to Syracuse with the three of us because we reverted to Brady and Bryce's age. And our wives are like, what is going on? Why are you acting this way? And so we do a little bit on the podcast. I think we're a little more tactful than we were. And I was like, oh, Megan's going to put her in the middle of this. But yeah, you're right, Casey. It's like we're playing nice with each other right now. We're being respectful.
You don't have to be.
But no, because it's Megan's introduction. So right after introduction's over, then,
Yeah. And so I think part of the thing, Megan, I think it's great because, you kind of know where we are. And I think, we'll talk a little bit here in a minute of, if we brought you in, like where we're at, like how would it start? So when you were going to start like kicking off coaching somebody, where do you start in the process?
Yeah. So that's actually kind of what I was alluding to with just the last two podcasts and listening to them. In a sense, you guys did a great job, like just talking about where you're at, where you think you want to be, what motivates you. And I could identify, so for me, what step one typically looks like, and Kevin, I don't know how much you even look at any of my Instagram stuff, but I'm starting to post more, directly, like, specifically about health coaching and what it is and what it looks like and all that kind of stuff. Like step one typically is getting to know each other, which I don't know the brothers super well, but I've met you both. But getting to know each other and then getting to know who you are and why you're here. And not just like I want to lose weight or I want to become more active or these kind of overarching goals, but like that why. And what is that sort of vision of yourself in 1, 5, 10 years, 20 years, which you guys were talking a lot about that, right? Because of sort of a stage of life that I'm not quite in because my kids are on the younger end, even though I'm not too far off girls' ages, but my kids are a little younger. But that state, like it's kind of naturally happening because you all are kind of in this stage of like maybe kids leaving the nest, kids getting a little older. Wait, now our job changes, but how do I see the second half of my life or whatever it is? So it's defining that. There could be some assessments involved, right? Like some health assessments. Like, again, you guys already did a lot of that stuff. But it's really identifying a vision of who you are and then like why is it you want to be that person? Because, and you guys talked about this a little bit, like, because it is that why that will help you on days where it doesn't feel easy. Or you go through a period of time, and Kevin, I think I did take a few notes and some, but you made a comment too about like for you, some of the challenges for you look like when something disrupts the routine, whether it's COVID or a shoulder thing or whatever, something disrupts the routine and it's like it kind of all falls to the wayside. And then all of a sudden it's like a year's gone by or whatever it is. And you're like, oh crap. Right. So, knowing your why and then setting up kind of smaller contingency plans, along the way to kind of keep those smaller daily tasks close instead of constantly thinking about like the end goal. End goal's good, but sometimes it gets overwhelming. So yeah, the process typically starts off with kind of getting to know why you're here, what it is you want. And then there could be a lot of things in sort of that wheel of wellness, as we call it, that are interest you, but what's the one that we want to prioritize right now? So we would talk about that and then start forming, SMART goals, basically, which a lot of people know what that is, even just from business. Some SMART goals around those things. And then going into that process, knowing that you go after that, what would it look like if you're trying to do XYZ? We talk through that. And you guys were doing that a lot naturally on the podcast, but talking through those small tasks and then giving them a go for a week or 2 weeks. And then we meet back. How did that go? What went well? Why did it go well? Or why didn't it go well? Like what, you're trying to get more water in. Why did it not go well? And we talk through why did it go well? Okay, well, what's something you can do to change that? And it's kind of experimenting. It's just finding those little things that actually get you to be able to create that routine in your life. Does that make sense? That answer your question?
It makes a lot of sense. And then I'm guessing that also part of this at the most basic level is there's a little bit of accountability there, right? When I say accountability, I know that I have a meeting with Megan in 2 weeks. Exactly. And I know I'm going to have to talk about my success or my failures. And I think where Brian Casey and I have found success is we talk to each other. So yeah, we do it in this format with a podcast and now the rest of the world can hear it. But the truth of the matter is all it is the world has the opportunity to hear of what we've been doing our whole life, which
Yeah.
is holding each other accountable. Probably one of the best gifts we've ever been given is I have two brothers that are very close to me in age. And I don't think that anyone would label me as a hyper competitive person, right? And if I lose, if we're in your basement playing table tennis and I lose, I lose, I move on.
Hey,
But I hate
not
losing.
gonna throw the paddle through the wall.
Yeah. But I hate losing. So like, and my dad knew that, where it's not just this, wow, all three of the Wright brothers have graduate degrees. Well, why do you think that happened? Because there's an underlying. So I think it's served us well. And it's funny because we've all kind of ebbed and flowed and yo-yoed, and it depends where we are. And, at one point, Brian will challenge the group of us, and Casey's been like, I'm too busy at work. I got, on. Or Casey will be like, hey, we're getting back into this. Or times where we can see data, we see each other's data because we literally share it through the health app.
Right.
So I know. And now I notice that it sends you trends. And I'm like, son of a bitch. Because it'll be like, Brian's trend is he's moving more over the last week. And I'm like, what has he been doing? And Casey's been trending more. And so I'm like, well, I got to be a little bit more active because, we haven't talked about it, but part of this podcast is, okay, where are you? Like, what did you do last week? Or since we talked last, are you better or worse, or, staying the same? So I think we've had that luxury. I think that's part of it where you're like, okay, someone's going to talk to me and ask how I'm doing. And I don't want to fail them. I don't want to be, embarrassed is the wrong word, but I want to make sure that I present myself in the best way.
No, I think here's what I was hoping. So Megan, we had talked about you a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and here's kind of my challenges for you. You got three people, right, that can follow rules very clearly and will hold each other accountable for following rules. You were an expert, obviously, in this field. And then recently or not recently, you are going to make a professional leap or jump where you're going to start coaching people, or you have, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Here's my challenge, if you take it up on this challenge, is design a plan for Brian, Kevin, and I that we must follow, that there's no option not to follow, right? Like, what do we eat? When do we eat? What we should be doing, how much we should be exercising. We will do every Sunday. We will do a podcast with our updates on how successful we've been. And then one or two things, this is a risk for you, Megan. Either one, this is extremely successful, which I would argue it probably will be pretty successful because we've done similar stuff in the past. Yeah. And, you can point to this, that, hey, I got the three Wright brothers in shape, right? Or it's a significant failure, and we're like, oh yeah, like, that clearly didn't work. But three of us will shoot you straight. Three of us will shoot you straight. Like, if you say, hey, this is what you need to eat, this is how much exercise you got to be doing, these are your goals, and then let's see if it works.
And I think also when it comes to, and what I'm looking for is, when it comes to like food, forget about what to eat, because I think that's it. But it's okay. Generally speaking, you need, we generally know what's kind of healthy, and we generally know what's kind of bad. Maybe we don't know to the level of how bad it is when we eat something, or that, hey, this type of food has been known to, relieve stress, those type of things. So providing us some things there, and then when it comes to exercise, not necessarily, oh, well, you should be, Brian Casey calls it the fat machine, but doing the elliptical, but saying, hey, this is what you guys should be targeting. When it comes to, mental health, we want to get into that as well too, because I think that's part of your coaching that you really like to hear, is that, a part of this is mental health. We know there's a correlation. I believe for me, there's a correlation between me being healthier and
emotional
healthier mentally.
Yeah.
I've been there. So I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg, but making sure that we work at that as well.
That was essentially my personal journey too. And I do think it's a very common, the program or the company I was with, we coached, there was a guideline. It wasn't as abstract as like true. If I were to just like work with somebody randomly, it'd be a little more abstract than working for a company that's going, here's what the four pillars of our company are, emotional health, exercise, nutrition, and sleep, which I love though, because those are four really, really, really important things. And emotional health, I think people come in mostly feeling one way or another about their about their mental health, emotional health. But then I worked with people for a year, an entire year. What was interesting is the people that came in and they did all these assessments and they rated themselves on each pillar. And there were people who came in that were like, yeah, I'm good. And then we'd like get into it and they'd be like, man, I mean, they didn't like literally say this to me, but I think they started reflecting more, going, maybe I wasn't as good as I thought, because this is how much this is affecting all these other things. So I do think mental health does play a big role, and it did personally for me. I did get into like a spiral of depression several years ago when we first were renovating this house. Brady, my youngest, was 2.5, and just like a handful, a lot of extra stressors kind of compounding on me. And then like, I just let everything go. But it was triggered probably by my mental health mostly. So I would love to do that. I can take the chat. I'd love to do what you're proposing. Casey, I also would challenge you 3, I'm assuming.
She's like, Brian hasn't said anything yet.
Oh,
She's like, it's like a poker. She's like,
it's so funny because I learned more from watching
she's
Brian.
Like, I know where Kevin's at because we talk to each other. I know where Casey's at. She's like, Brian said about.
I know where Brian's at.
Podcast. So Brian, she's waiting for Brian to be like, I'm out. Click.
I know where Brian's out based on, but this is my challenge because, okay, so first of all, Kevin, what you said earlier, which I think is really, really key. And it's not really about what I think, but what's interesting is that like, that this, like the relationship the 3 of you have and the way you hold each other accountable on probably lots of different things, not even just this, is a strength, right? And so that like, it's a strength that you utilize to keep yourself in line when you're trying to make strides, right? It's something that you use. What I heard in podcast 1 was that, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, obviously, okay, now I'm going to get sarcastic because a little bit, because I know you guys are being
I love it. The more sarcasm,
but Kevin basically is doing this because he thought he was going to die, and Casey's doing this because maybe it sounds like you are on this path of like, cause you have a different job, or not a different job. I mean, you're still in schools, but like, so from what I heard from you was, you're sort of similar with Kevin, but Kevin's in this a little bit more extreme, like dire situation where you were sort of like, I've got to get my shit together because the numbers were scary.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a little more complex than that. I think numbers are scary. I'm fat, out of shape, disgusting. All those things are true. Plus, probably more, and Brian can relate to this. I'm bored in this new job, like bored out of my mind. And I'm like, all right, I need to find something. I'm a very obsessive person. Like I overly obsess with stupid things for short periods of time.
Yeah.
And I think the next thing is going to be, and Brian did this when he switched careers for a couple of years, is health. I'm going to try it. At least. We'll see.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So that's like a focus, but there was, okay. Similar, but
and then 2 parts too.
Let me make sure I want to make sure I'm clear too. I wasn't saying Kevin is what I was referring to as the one that's like, it was more dire feeling because of the numbers. And then you went to the doctor later and you also feel like you need it. Brian, I hear some ambivalence for sure. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Everybody's in different stages of change, and that's another thing. Because everybody's in a different spot in their life, and what they feel like they can do versus what somebody else can do is different, because everybody's different. Everybody's different in where they are in their lives. But I did hear that if there was a motivation, it's the pilot's license. Isn't that you, Brian?
Yeah, I suppose. Although I come about it in a little bit different than Casey and Kevin this way. Like my whole motivation is just to beat them, candidly. Like, absent them, like I don't like if they're like, I don't really care about this, but I don't care about it either. Like whatever, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna go lose 20 pounds, and I'm like, F you guys, I'm gonna lose 30. And what I don't. And so like that, my pure motivation, as it's been in my whole life, is just to beat them.
I took you as the rope-a-dope. Last week was a rope-a-dope of Brian. He's like, oh, not a big deal. And then he won't eat for like 4 days straight. And then,
Yeah, I mean this
Areas.
so Megan, what the personalities that you're identifying are, I mean, imagine our mother. This is exactly what she dealt with for 40 years, and us in the backyard. And Brian, so I remember Brian, how old were you when Bernie McGraw bet that you couldn't be quiet for a certain amount of time? Were you like
8?
8 years old? So Megan, picture our neighborhood and picture, just Brian having the same sarcasm as an 8-year-old that he has now as a 45-year-old attorney. Brian's very intelligent and witty and can use words extremely well. And our next door neighbor basically said, Brian, I will bet you X amount of money.
It was
that
$20.
you-
$20 a lot
20
of money.
bucks for how long?
It was a long time. It was
It
probably
was a long time. And so Brian was like, done, I'm taking your money. And that's how Brian's personality has always been in terms of, you really want to
Yeah.
motivate him? Tell him that he can't do
Yeah,
something. Or tell him
winning's
that-
important.
Yeah, like
Yes, and
literally,
so-
as we're sitting there, he signed us up for a 5K for next week, and I'm like, oh,
Right.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
so-
Do you know where my anxiety is right now? As I'm like, son of a bitch, I gotta run a 5K next week. And so I did work out this week, but you're like, where's your anxiety? Now I applaud Brian, because at the end of it, I'll be like, there's no way I would have done it unless he literally put his hands on the keyboard and signed up. But right now I'm like, I realize it's 5K, and that's what, 3.1 miles. I don't even remember what it is.
Yeah.
And I'll probably be okay because it's a 5K. But my anxiety is like, oh, it's probably gonna snow. There's probably a blizzard coming in. We're gonna show up. I'm gonna have to do this. I'm gonna die halfway through. I hate running. I'm the
Yeah.
person, when you run, I go, I hate running. I hate running. I
So
hate
do
Don't die halfway through, because there's no chance. Well, there's very little chance of me feeling guilty, but if you die, I probably would feel a little bit guilty. At least, I mean, I didn't like, I signed you up. I didn't make you run, but
Well,
don't
that's-
die.
that was
So
gonna make
anyway-
you sign a form.
No, that's what Zach would say. Because I've gotten, okay, so I sit in Kevin's camp. I text him. I was literally, and what's really, really ironic, Kevin, when I text you and I said I hate running too, I was running on the treadmill. Which I have been doing a little bit more of, but like just sprints. It's like if I 30 seconds, walk for a minute and a half. But I went through a period where I was roped in 3 different times to do the relay, the pig relay. Like that's about as much as, and even then that is a marathon for me. And I remember getting so anxious about it. And Zach would say, why are you so anxious? Who cares? Like, so what? What if you can't run the whole thing? You just walk. No big deal. You'll get to the end eventually. And I'm like, yeah.
Well, it's easy for Zach, because Zach will take off running for about a year, and then all of a sudden he'll be like, yeah, I crushed 5 miles. I'm like, I've been seeing you for a year. And you
Tell
just
me
see
about
out there like running through the neighborhood. He's like, yeah, I'm like, geez.
Yeah,
Um,
but I guess the mentality around it, right? The way he frames it, though, it is a little bit of a lesson of like, no, you're right. Like, I'm not out there to win. I'm not out there to whatever. I'm just doing it to do it, and yeah. But I do hate running as well. So to kind of go back to what you were saying, Casey, I can help whoever wants to be helped along the way in helping design plans for you, but again, kind of, and this is where again people, it's a newer concept to most people. I'm also here to really help you to come up with your own plan. I can give you guidance, obviously, like the specifics of like eating, what to eat, what not to eat. I'm not a registered dietitian or anything by that means, but I mean, I have enough general knowledge to be able to help with that. But there is a component of, I'm assuming that, yes, you have this challenge, or maybe you have like this year, or whatever you're doing it, like the challenge is sort of a year long, I think, for you guys. I'll ask you this. I mean, the challenge is a year long, but I'm assuming your journey is beyond that.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely the point. This isn't like, well, I think part of the year long was, even though a year is a long time, which is, saying the journey is between now and death. You're like, okay, well, that's like a fire hose. So for us, it was like,
but that's truth, right? Yeah, that's truth.
And saying, okay, well, 1 year you can do this, and at the end of it, if it doesn't work, I mean, I think we're all smart enough to know that we've done it before. That
Right.
Well, so
But
But I mean, my
Casey,
point is
yeah.
that the end game is, yes, you have a challenge, like you're challenging each other and all that. Like there's sort of the shorter term goal challenge within the greater journey of life. And I know it's like all cliche and fluff sounding, but like, it's truth, right? So what I find important when I'm working with people is that we come up with things that are sustainable. And I know we've kind of had this conversation, I think, a little bit back in the day, or like with other neighbors and things like that. But like what is sustainable for you, and to be able to kind of activate that, because when the year is over, let's say when you get to the point where you're at like a goal weight, obviously there's going to be a different push, you know, with a shorter term goal. But then when you get to that, the thing I find when I've worked with people is that there's sort of this like mental stop. And I had many people through the process of coaching them realize I need to get rid of that mental stop point, because that's when I all of a sudden go, okay, and then everything starts to come back on again, right? So the point is to figure out what habit change, like what things you change that get you to your goal, but then you can actually somewhat sustain, right? And so that plays a part in designing sort of plans. Now, again, that's the behavior piece. So like, say you're at a certain calorie count right now, and then you get to your goal weight, well, that'll change. Like, their changes are made in the process, right? But the actual things that you're doing, you want to make sure that you're doing, because I think, Casey, was it you that just said, like, give me the rules? So rules aren't bad, but also rules can be hard sometimes, because if there's this, like, creating your own rules is important, is I guess what I'm trying to say, versus external rules.
Yeah, I just thought, when we started, so big picture, we used to do this podcast all the time, and it's called Limited Upside for a reason, because we used to get ourselves in trouble for the stupid things we would say. And in order to come back on to doing the podcast, I put the structure in place where we would talk about something other than something controversial, I suppose. And that's where weight loss came up.
Yeah. No, and structure.
And it's so interesting is like, and that's why you're here, is you're kind of the expert in the room. Brian, Kevin, and I could argue back and forth, and we'll hold each other accountable. And I venture to say we would find some success. There's no way, if we continue this on and we're running, working out, and eating better, that we're not going to find success.
No,
this might be a little more interesting to have.
I mean, the accountability thing is funny. As I was sitting here thinking, of Brian's like, well, I just want to win. You know what it is the fear is having in Casey go off. They find health, whatever health looks for them. We all traveled to a family function, and Brian goes, I'm not going to be the fat ass. Like, they're going to take pictures of the three of us, and we all look like triplets, and one person's going to look outside. Even when we go on vacation together, we're like, it's very funny, Megan, because, we don't live very close, but you've seen my brothers have been to my house sometimes, and, we've got together a little bit, but you forget. And so when we go travel together, we feel like you're in a zoo. Like, we're like, why are people staring at us? And you're like, oh, wait, I just remembered they see three middle-aged men that look absolutely identical. But
what if you walked by a window? Yeah. What if you walked by one of my windows one day and my kid was like, oh, there's Kevin. I was like, that's not Kevin, that's his brother.
Right.
I don't know which brother.
No, that's it.
Yeah. But then the weights are the same. And then, when they don't stay consistent, and I use weight, but I should stop saying that. I should say health. But when they kind of go off, then you're like, oh, like, one of them will be like, I didn't know that you had an older brother. And they go, no, he's the younger one. He's not the older one. I'm like, oh, yeah. So anyway, part of that is just when we are together that you're like, okay, I'm not going to be the one. So grades was the same way. Like, when I started college 2 years before them, I'll be honest, my parents were just happy I was staying in college. Now I have like a 2.5 to barely 3.0 GPA, and my parents are just excited. Brian, Casey go to their freshman year. They're like, yeah, we got like a 3.8. I'm like, well, that's obviously got to, I got to, and all of a sudden I no longer got any grades less than them. I mean, that's kind of how it's been our whole life, whether it's, So, I know we're kind of getting at time, and it's funny. I'm sitting there. I got to go check the smoker because I'm bringing pork belly and brisket over to Megan.
I think I figured out the problem why you can't lose weight.
Well, it's
pork belly and brisket.
It's food porn too, because there is not just our families. There's a bunch of people coming over, and when you kind of aren't eating that stuff as much anymore, it's not that you crave it, but you're kind of like watching the Food Network. And so I'm certainly not. I will try all of the stuff that I'm making, but I'm not going to overindulge.
Right. Well, and
But-
that's the stuff where coaching can really help. So like, let's say you're trying to like really stick to certain, goals right now because you're trying to really like lose weight, get blood pressure down, like all that stuff. But then there are going to be days that like nobody can be perfect. And like, truthfully, perfect is boring. So it's sort of like, go back to that mental health and the emotional piece of, okay, what would it look like if you have some brisket today? How's that going to make you feel? And for some people, I'm not saying this is you, this is just kind of an example. I have a lot of people that would like just shame, guilt. If I have like one weekend of like watching football, having beer and eating things I wouldn't normally eat, Monday, I'm just going to say, F it, and just feel bad and like spiral the other way, right? Because a lot of times what happens is there's this pendulum swing. It's you indulge or you go on a vacation or whatever it is, have a birthday party. And you either go one way where I had girlfriends that would like eat bad. I have that in air quotes for people who can't see. And they were like, well, now I have salads every single day for the next month and work out. Like it's the swing towards the extreme one or extreme towards screw it, why bother? And it's kind of reframing that to like, okay, so like that one, there's no scientific evidence that says having brisket tonight is going to completely screw up everything you've done for the past month. What will matter is what you do moving forward, right? And kind of, you're creating a framework for your life. So right now, like you are pushing to lose weight, get blood pressure and all these numbers down, but creating some tools in your toolkit so that when you go into more of that maintenance, like, okay, I'm at the place I feel very balanced, I feel good, I want to stay in this zone, but not feeling like you have to restrict and be perfect all the time, right? And so it's kind of like creating these tools to be able to like have, the piece of pizza or two, but then pivot back to everything you've been doing because you've set yourself for a sustainable, healthy lifestyle and move forward the week, until the next, potential indulgence comes along or whatever it is, right? And that's typically my goal I hope to help people reframe that a little bit and kind of get a little bit away from all or nothing. Not that I'm assuming that you all are that way, but just to kind of give another idea of like what it is, especially when it comes to weight loss and eating and like this specific lane of health, right? Of what I try to really help people with. But all that kind of gets worked through the conversations and the health coaching. But to your point, Casey, the CDC recommends, and these are all things that basically, I mean, most people who are paying attention and care know. So 150 minutes of movement, moderate movement a week. That's 20 to 30 minutes a day of just moderate. That could be cleaning the house, doing yard work, walking with your neighbor and their dog. Like all that kind of stuff, right? Just general 150 minutes. And then there's 75 minutes. This is the recommendation for adults to kind of live in a healthy framework. 75 minutes, so it's 150 moderate or 75 minutes of rigorous, right? So if you love to run and you don't have a ton of time to like be, going on walks or being on your feet a lot because you have a desk job or whatever, but you want to run or you want to be on elliptical and you're doing more of that rigorous, like 75 minutes a week, that's the general recommendation. And then strength training 2 to 3 times a week. So like that's sort of the general CDC recommendation. You can see variations of that, but for adults, that is where sort of the movement piece sits. Sleep is 7 to 9 hours, right? And then the nutrition stuff gets a little more nuanced, but we can go into that as well if you like. But
yeah, I think that's probably the struggle. So update, Brian. Brian, I was hanging out with Brian yesterday in the last couple of days, so I kind of get a sense of him. Kevin, what's your update? Have you been at the gym every day?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so well, every day is not. So, last time we went through this and Megan knew this because I would get up and I go to the gym at 4:30 every morning, and I did it for a long time. I've been really good about going. Have I gone every day? No, because life happens. So from the gym, I would say actually I probably am doing all of those things that Megan just said. I went in Friday night, had a really, really good workout, felt really good about it. Didn't get a chance to go on the day, didn't go in yesterday, but I have a plan to go in this week.
Mhm.
When it comes to nutrition, I was definitely in the spiral prior to us having these podcasts. There's no doubt about it. Like when the numbers came back, all of it was just spiraling down. So from a food perspective, I wouldn't say that I'm eating clean, but I've done a really good job. I'm still staying away from processed. And when I say processed food, I'm not talking about a Stouffer's pizza. I'm talking about, your Ruffles potato chips,
Yeah.
your Grater's ice cream that's stacked up in the freezer, all of that stuff, and staying
Yeah.
away from it for the most part. From a weight perspective, we don't have time to go into it, but we had the pretty significant weight drop that happens in the first couple of weeks. The good news is I haven't, I'm there now. I'm getting into probably what is much more normal of losing less than a pound a week. I don't think I've
Yeah.
lost more than a half a pound since we weighed in last.
That's kind of what I want to get to the point of. Like, I mean,
Yeah, no.
here's the truth. Like, and then Brian, I want to hear what you're doing. So I'm up at 4:00 every morning. I think
Yeah.
on Saturday, Brian was here. I got up a little bit later. How have you guys been reading the book Spark? Have you guys?
Oh, I forget
So
that.
interesting on Spark, and I want to throw another book at you, Brian and Kevin, because Kevin, I started reading it again, and I realized it's not exactly what I wanted to read. Anyways, 30 minutes of exercise every day and heart rate at max 70%. Try to get your heart rate above 70% of max. So you got to figure out what your max heart rate is and get 70% of
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
So that's a challenge, Brian, Kevin. That's our latest
Yeah.
challenge. We have to get in there and do that. Weight, I during the week I'm pretty good, but Brian and I and we went out for drinks and dinner on Friday, and we ate, not healthy, and had old fashions, which probably aren't good for you. And then yesterday we went and visited a college and ate terrible, but worked out. But weight wise, I hit the exercise goals, but weight wise, I'm not
Yeah.
significant change in there.
And-
Brian, how are
and-
you doing?
Yeah.
I haven't done anything.
That's what I'm like.
Good
So
work.
what is the deal there, man? Like you said that to me the other day. What is the deal? Like, what is the obstacle to you hitting the gym?
Oh, time. I mean, I'm at my desk at 7:00 in the morning, and I leave, 11 hours later. And
Yeah. So I was hoping that that maybe the book would draw that to you, that if you can get 30 minutes of exercise like you used to do, I mean, listen, it's going to take some dedication. You're going to have to get up at 4 a.m. again, or 5 a.m, whatever that is. But mentally wise, if you can get that 70% heart rate for 30 minutes, you're going to become not only better attorney, but you're also get your serotonin levels and dopamine levels up, that you'll feel better about yourself.
yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think what actually I find interesting, probably sounds from an area, or probably doesn't sound the greatest, but that you guys find this so challenging, right? And so, like, I know exactly what I would need to do to get in shape. I've done it at least a couple of times in my life. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes willpower, but all of which I have and all of which I can do. It just takes time. But I see the struggle with both of you on how to do this, and I'm like,
Well,
it's not complicated. It's hard, but it's not complicated.
Well, I said that last
challenge.
podcast.
So
You only have to do two things. You
why
only have to
won't
do
you
two
get
things.
up? Why
You
won't
only-
you get up?
Because I will get up at some point, and then I'll just go flying by you.
All right, so
but-
get up tomorrow.
Yeah, but you only have to do two things. That's it. Two things.
Yeah, so get up tomorrow.
Go run 30 minutes and put the fork down. You'll lose weight.
So I think what I've learned or reflected in the book is, it doesn't matter what you do to get your heart rate up, but you want to get 70% of maximum capacity. When you're running, you're probably closer to
It's the
I don't know,
most efficient
85%.
exercise you can do.
Yeah.
It's the most efficient exercise you can do.
So next week I expect it to
Brian,
be.
are you saying so you're I'm trying to understand your argument, which is okay, it's not complicated.
I
But
didn't say it was not difficult. I said it's not complicated.
So based on that comment, I would have expected you'd be like, hey, dipshits, It's not complicated. It's not hard. I don't know why you guys are struggling, but in the breath before that, you're like, yeah, I haven't done anything. So is it you're just out and you're like, hey, I'm along for the ride? Or is it that not necessarily that you have to sign up for what, kind of the coaching that Megan, but kind of where are you in the space? Are you just along for the ride? Which is fine if you are.
I think here's my thing. I think I'm waiting for both of you to get a little bit of a head start and then me to chase you and fly by you. And I keep waiting for you to get the head start, and I just keep hearing the struggle. I'm like, well, Jesus, put the fork down and go get exercise.
Right? Yeah, it's so funny because that's why it's so interesting of why I decided to even go down this path. One is you guys want to get a podcast back, but why in my head did I think this was a good idea? It had a lot to do with losing weight, and Kevin, your numbers were crazy and I'm disgusting to look at. But Brian, also, I thought, and one of the reasons I said we should read this book is because I think that exercise has a lot to do with mental health. I said this the other day, last week, is I think the challenge for you is the me too, because we're identical twins, is the mental health aspect of it. Like, you're gonna feel better if you get that exercise in, which will make this journey worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
So look, can I ask a quick question? So Brian, it's gonna sound like silly, but like on a scale of 0 to 10, is 0 being like, you can call it readiness or motivation, whatever you want to call it, like say readiness. So 0, like you're like, screw this, I have no interest, or I don't want to, or whatever it is. And 10, like you're all in, which is maybe closer to where, say, Kevin is. Where would you say you fall on that scale?
Probably a 5.
Okay. So what makes you a 5 and not like a 3 or lower?
Oh, because I realize everything Casey says, that like, I think exercise and eating right and being in shape is just a necessary part of being the best of who you can be. Yeah. Now, the difference between it being a 5 and a 3 is, because I know that, the difference between being a 5 and a 7 is I'm going to need something to chase. Okay. And so, I look at it and I look at where you guys are. I'd be like, all right, I'll give them another week.
You're number 3, Brian, on the app. You are in 3rd place.
Yep.
Yeah. What would it look like to not chase them, though? That's my next question. So what would it look like to not chase them? Like, is there anything else that you could chase?
Yeah, no, I think that's because I have enough stuff in my life that I got to deal with, that I would need the motivation of not letting them see victory to be able to do it. Otherwise, like, in the list of priorities, it wouldn't ever be very high. It wouldn't be high enough to get my attention until that happened.
So Brian, let me ask you a question, because we started this. So did you record this?
Yeah.
Okay. So Megan, we didn't ask for permission for all, but we don't have to. So he recorded this. We've never done that.
I heard it when I popped on it. It said recording in progress.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So the question was, and we don't know if we can, like, should we record this and also put it on YouTube? And for people listening out there, kind of back to what I said the other week, is probably the last 3.5 minutes are times in which, if you could see the look on Casey's face when Brian's explaining himself, or the look on my face where you're like, dude, you're full of shit.
Why do you think so?
I realized in the conversation what he's waiting for. He's literally, so here's the thing. I weigh more than Brian by, I don't know. So probably, I'm guessing 8 pounds maybe right now. I'm guessing at that. He will get motivated when I pass him.
Yeah.
So my goal now is to pass him.
How much you weigh, Brian? How much you weigh?
Somewhere between 215 and 220.
All right.
Okay. So about 10 pounds. All right. So that's it. You would pass. So we got to pass you. My motivation is,
or no.
When I was reading the book, it was interesting, is I am motivated to get into better shape, and I do want my clothes to fit better, and those numbers should get down, and blood pressure and numbers are crazy. Even though I got to do the blood work, is I'm really interested on the mental health aspect of it. Like what exercise is going to do to the brain, and that's why the book's super interesting. And I really, in the first couple chapters, Kevin's all right, are school related. I remember that's why I read it last time, but it's just starting to get interesting now about how exercise changes brain chemistry. All right, I'm going to throw another book at you. Write this down, Brian.
Is that Spark, by the way? Or
That's
okay,
Spark.
I need to read that, because I'm super, super interested in the mental health aspect in general, just in general. And yes, there is a lot of research that supports it. I'd love to get more into the science if that's what that book is about. I'm very interested. And I would say too, from a personal standpoint, when my mental health, part of the reason why I think some of that fell by the way, like was, getting depressed and all that kind of stuff, was because I was not going. I've always been active in some form. And, having a 2.5-year-old and spending pretty much 24/7 managing, renovating this house, I was not getting, and I like to lift. So for me, it's lifting. And I force myself to do some form of like interval something, whether it's a treadmill or Peloton or something like that. I force myself, because I know that, I still need that movement, even if it's in a smaller dose for me. Some people, it's in a bigger dose because they love cardio and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But no, I was just trying to kind of get at like sort of the people, unfortunately, like you can, and your brother, so you're going to like poke at Brian as long for infinity to get going. But really in the end, like he has to decide when his 5 goes to a 7, 8, or 9. And it sounds like that is very much determined by them.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wait, hold on a second. This is because I can tell you exactly how this is going to go, right? Because it's gone this way our entire life. You guys will screw around at some point, like someone will get serious and get some results, and then I'll chase you down, and then beat you, and then let you chase me, right? That's what's going to happen, and I'll drag you there, and that's what's going to happen.
It's a little overconfidence. I doubt any of that.
Yeah, I
shit.
think it's
And
a
I
little-
also doubt
Oh, wait, what happened
that's
last time?
happened before.
What happened last time? So
Right,
what happened?
Yeah,
but you're
Wait,
so okay. So
wait.
but here's-
Wait. What happened in 97?
Everybody's the
No.
hero of the story.
Wait, what
You're
happened?
the hero.
What happened in 2017?
I don't know,
Yeah,
but I'm
but
sure
you're-
we were side characters.
Brian,
in the story
I would argue in 2017. So if you
Yep.
want to use the metric of pure weight, you
Mhm.
won without a doubt.
Yeah.
If you want to do the metric of like you were skinny fat. We used to talk all the time. I was like, you are the skinniest fat guy I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because you hated weight. So if it was running, I'm like, nope, Brian's out there every day. I can see it on my watch. He loves running. He'll run to work, run home. You drug me along to do it. But if you're using other metrics, I would argue that I was in better shape than you were.
Yeah, it could be. I think the challenge is I need a KPI, right? And so like weight is a KPI. And so I'm like, all right. And so and I just need, like, it's a David Goggins version of like, just go out there and do it. And
Yeah.
so, every
Are you
day
doing percentage, or are you doing the actual number? Are you doing percentage of weight loss?
Yeah.
Or the number?
percentage of.
Percentage.
Okay.
But it
So
doesn't matter. We're all close enough that it's not
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
True. But you're not all starting at the same, although you two are kind of close, but you're not all starting at the same point. That's the point, right? Is like,
Yeah.
you're not starting at the same point, but you're ending at the same time. Like you're, as far as like the weight you start with. Now, the reason why I asked is the company I work for, Calibrate. We didn't talk in pounds, although people do. They do. But it was percentage of weight loss. I found that really, really interesting. I really liked that because then the program was really treating everybody wherever they were. And somebody's 10% is a lot different than somebody else's 10% as far as total pounds lost, right? So that's why I was wondering if you guys had some sort of percentage.
Should be interesting, the evolution of this. I think Brian's probably right. I got a lot from the little bit he said that, yeah, I get it. I get it now, Brian. You're just going to wait until we're close and then you're going to blow by us. I get it. Hey, I'm sending you another book. I just sent it to you in addition to Spark, which I think we should continue to read because it's going to get interesting, is a book actually my doctor shared with me a couple years ago called Accidentally Overweight. I don't know if any of you guys have read that before.
No,
Definitely take a look at that. It talks about that, and I read this years ago. It just talks about how people mindlessly gain a certain percentage of weight every year without really paying attention and knowing about it, and then what that does overall health. I can't even honestly remember it, other than it's pretty impactful on there too. So definitely want to talk about that. I also, in the future, we can definitely update, but in the future, I want to talk about, and maybe bring in experts on this too, about new diet drugs out there. I'm super curious about what is the diet drug that came out with treating type 2 diabetes. And
So that's what I worked. So the company I worked with, it combined the clinical aspect, obesity, with the semaglutides, with lifestyle.
Yeah.
Everybody I worked with, 200 plus people, were on either Wegovy, Ozempic, Mounjaro, Rybelsus, you name it, like any of those semaglutides. Is that the class of drug is GLP-1, and you're hearing a lot about it. I was just reached out by the New York Times and Wall Street Journal on LinkedIn. I did talk to Wall Street Journal yesterday, which is kind of interesting.
So I'm all over. I'm super interested about that.
Very
Well,
interesting. It is
oh,
very,
I'm
very
curious.
interesting.
So
It's
Megan,
very-
talk about, because you already experienced it because you're at Calibrate, but talk about how GLP-1s are impacting your how the impact of that
hold
is
on.
independent
So,
of what you're doing.
so hold on a minute. So we're
Yeah.
over an hour,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
so,
but we're interested because I want to hear this part of it.
all right.
And this could be a whole nother podcast.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
This could be a
Can
whole
I
other
real quick?
podcast.
Real quick though, and I know Brian or Casey, you keep trying to sort of hone. I think you guys sort of have something in place, sort of the way you guys were the last podcast talked about. Like, I felt like you were really trying to hone in on it. So, like, what is it we're doing? But what I'd love to hear is, like, I've heard Kevin say, like, here's what my goals are. My goals are is I'm trying to hit the gym X amount of days a week. I'm trying to get X amount of it is elliptical cardio, whatever, and the other amount is strength. And nutrition's a little more nuanced. It would take a little bit longer, but like you have an idea of kind of where you're eating. Are you still using MyFitnessPal? And then I would say, like, I'd love to know what, and you don't have to tell me now, we can do it on a different podcast or separately off of this, like what each of you are currently doing and like what your goal, like what is each week, like what do you want your weeks to look like, your day to work look like, your weeks to look like. And then if there's anything I feel like we could discuss to tweak, I mean, it sounds like so far you guys are doing what, like Brian said, it's not, I hate saying it's not complicated because it is, because we're human and we are complicated. But
Yeah. No, I get where you're going. So
and then I
just
can
couple-
talk about those.
so I think, obviously, Megan, we're going to have you back. We can talk a little bit off the podcast of what that looks like and frame it up. And, I think this did a good job of kind of outlining how you view the health coach and how you view what success could look like from a health coach perspective, which I think is great. I think for the next podcast or one coming up, we put some structure around it in terms of kind of, hey, this is homework for us to say, this is what we're doing. Maybe we send it to you beforehand so you can have an opportunity.
Yeah, I even thought about sending you guys something beforehand. I was like, well, we'll just,
Yeah, so send it to us and then we'll kind of create a structure and then, we'll figure out whether, we want to have you come back on a regular basis. Is it every podcast? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Or maybe we kind of break it up a little bit. We'll figure it out. But then, when we get into kind of I just think it's the question about the drugs, it's a great, but we're like an hour and 15 minutes in. And I think that could be another hour-long conversation, which is, let's put a
well, and if you want to, and if you want to cut this off just to be able to publish this one and ask me off whatever, to see if it's something you'd want to talk about further in another podcast. I have a lot of thoughts. I think I've talked that guy's ear off from a coach perspective, right? From a behavior change perspective, and what I experienced with 200 people who were on the medicine and needed the medicine, legitly needed the medicine. And I think that's what was when I made that comment to the reporter or whatever, the journalist, that might have surprised him a little bit. He's like, well, you bring a different perspective than I really thought. So I might, he's just kind of laying the groundwork. But people aren't coming into Calibrate that need to lose 5 pounds. But that's all you're hearing on the media is like, oh, everybody that's using a semaglutide is getting it off label. And, like some of the Hollywood people, which is probably happening. They're just getting it to lose 5-10 pounds. They don't need it. I'm sure there are people doing that now they know about the drug, but for 2+ years, there have been people that have been on it through Calibrate and some various other, probably even local weight loss doctors, things like that have been prescribing it because Wegovy was FDA approved for to treat obesity back in 2021. And so that really opened the floodgates and but you have to be eligible. And a lot of it, so there's, I mean,
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I have a little bit of experience with some of this stuff. Eligibility is a big question mark. I mean, there are doctors that will prescribe it for you, whether you're eligible or not.
Absolutely. So exactly. Insurance isn't necessarily going to approve you.
Yeah,
but
you're not going to get
people who
insurance
are
for that.
spending $1,800 a month to take it.
Yeah,
Insane.
yeah. I'd love to
But
talk
I mean,
more
that's
about
a
that.
whole nother. Now through Calibrate, that's why I think what I was like, the reporter I was talking to, I think he was like, he didn't fully understand. I'm like, there are people kind of getting through the cracks to Calibrate that only need to lose 5 pounds. Like, our program was set up where that you were eligible or you weren't eligible. You had to have a BMI over 27 and a comorbidity, or a BMI of over 30. Had to be a certain age range because you have to be on commercial insurance. Like, my dad couldn't apply because he's on Medicare, even though he could use it.
There's always ways around. So, and we can
Yeah.
definitely talk about this in the next podcast, but
Yeah.
to give you some idea of the competitive nature of us. So last time we did this with pre-COVID, I wanted to beat Brian and Kevin so bad. I took testosterone replacement therapy. So I did TRT before, and I took, and I,
How'd
and
that
I-
work out for you? Yeah,
Yeah.
how'd that work out for you? How
And
much
I
weight
took
did you
my own
gain on
board.
that?
I took my own blood work, and I did it for about a year and a half.
Wow.
And I learned a lot about it. How I can tell you stories how to go. Why did I gain weight off of it? Because COVID shut the gym down. COVID shut the gym down.
You had good results on TRT by losing weight.
Not losing weight, muscle.
Gaining
And,
muscle.
it's so interesting, Brian. I
Wait a
remember
minute.
this pretty
So
clearly.
basically, this is the equivalent. Wait a minute, you roided up, man. So we had
Yeah,
a competition.
Well,
Let's not finding this out right now.
Dude,
I
I
never
quit my bed in college.
This
I'm
is a
going to
Casey
do
trait
that.
too. This is a
I'm
trait
going to
that
do
Casey
that. I
has.
will find a way to. And I remember, Brian, we were riding our bike 40 miles or whatever we're doing downtown, and we were down by Little Italy, and you're
Yeah.
like, dude, your freaking legs are huge. How much do you work out with your legs? I'm like, yeah, that's the testosterone doing
So
that.
why did you stop? Why did you stop?
The gym closed, and I couldn't work out anymore. But it's a really interesting topic I'd love to talk to you about, because I would take blood work monthly and pay attention to my liver enzymes and estrogen levels. And I took that monthly. I also would love to have a conversation about if you're not on top of it, what that does to your mental health, and how changing testosterone, that's going to affect your mental health, and why doing that over really high stressful situations is really kind of bad news.
Mhm.
So I'm very interested in that. I also got a good indication of the prescription mills and how these things work. Like, that you can find a prescription. You're not going to get covered by your insurance at all, but you can find doctors that can prescribe it. Should I been prescribed that? No,
Well,
I
wait a
shouldn't
minute.
have been.
I got to go back. Do we have to have a disclosure that you cannot use for this challenge? Like,
It's so
did the
interesting. I was going to
challenge-
send you guys the email. I get emails about this stuff all the time.
I
about-
believe you, and then
Yeah.
we not for this podcast, but there's other bombs that you've dropped in conversations years later into our lives. So I'm like, what are you talking about? But do I need to be concerned that this is not a level playing field for this?
No, I'm going to tell you straight out. It's not going to be a level playing field. I'll tell you straight out.
That's it.
It's
on.
not gonna be a
I'm
level
not-
playing
The Megan's like, yeah, okay, all right. Well, I got to go check the trigger. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Brisket's probably at its peak. Pork belly's happening. I will say next week we'll do a podcast, because Brian, when is the run? Is it Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, next week we're going to talk about Casey's TRT ventures and experience, because I'm fascinated by this.
I
We're
figured
going to
you
talk
would.
about all the ways he's going to. I'm not going to call it cheating. It's not cheating. I mean, but all the ways he's.
I
gonna
haven't
make-
decided if I'm going to do that.
cheating. I think it's cheating.
Well,
Why
I'm
is it
also
cheating?
super interested in the
Was
long
Barry Bonds and Mark McGuire cheating?
This
Yeah.
isn't the Major League Baseball. This is a fatty contest. I figure out how to put the fork down. Listen,
Listen.
if you're going to wire your jaw
Oh,
shut,
I
that's
am
not
so
cheating.
motivated after the last 5 minutes. 10 minutes here.
I corked my bats in college baseball and off-season training because I couldn't stand not winning. So yeah,
I know.
yeah,
I knew
will-
about the cork bats. I didn't know that you were roiding up.
Maybe that should be the rules. There aren't any rules. However you
No,
get there is however you get
You're,
there.
you're missing the whole point here. Of everything that Megan said the last hour, you're missing the whole point.
I
You're
told you
so
my
off
point is
the
to win.
rails. All right. Megan, we appreciate your time. We are definitely going to have you back.
Yeah.
We'll circle back and we'll kind of create some
Yeah.
structure. So you.
No, that's fine. No, this was fine. No,
Yeah.
this was fine. And even if like, well, you and I can kind of talk maybe even later today, but even if you want me for an hour here and there to discuss whatever topic comes up,
Yep.
health-wise, right? Like roiding or whatever, or Ozempic or whatever.
Yeah,
Or
and then you
want
should
me to
probably,
pop in for like 15 minutes just to do like a check.
Yep.
Once we kind of figure out, right? We can do that too. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
I hope it was
Definitely.
informative. I hope that
Yeah, that's great.
No,
you
it
know,
was really good.
I think a lot of people think that like I'm gonna come on and be like, what are you doing? Oh no, you should be doing this. What are you doing? Oh, you should be doing this. And that's the thing, is like it's a little more, it's not that it's complicated but it's everybody's different, right? So general framework and general ideas of what to do is similar, but like it's all gonna be different according to each of your lives and what your kind of end game is. So
Yep.
anyway.
All right.
All right.
Well, I will see you in a little bit. Go Bengals.
All right. I know I gotta go clean some bathrooms or something. ready.
But we appreciate it very much. I think
Yeah.
this is very good, and we will talk to everybody later.
Okay.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Killing me, Smalls.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. God have mercy on your soul.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.